Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here with the slides. I've included a link to the slides as well as a link to a Google Doc where you can feel free to post questions that you may have as we walk through everything. So first off, I don't think this is going to take a whole hour. So there'll be plenty of times for questions as we go. Feel free to interrupt if you have a question. I'll probably pause a couple different times, double check and see if there are any, and then we can talk through things and maybe do a live demo at the end if anyone's curious. Why do we need to run Windows in Google Cloud? Why would we want to do such a thing? Well, first off, it's explicitly prohibited that we use Windows here at GitLab for a number of reasons. The link that quote is from is gives a lot of the reasons why. The main one, I believe, is security. And so we have a little bit of a conflict here, though, because I'm working on .NET framework support for static analysis. And with that, .NET framework only runs on Windows. And so with that, it makes it very difficult to develop Windows features for GitLab if I can't and don't have a Windows machine. I'll also throw out the disclaimer that I hadn't touched Windows for well over a decade to this point. So very well entrenched Linux and Mac user. So some of this is just the learnings that I've had, and then also the pattern that I found that allowed me to explore the .NET framework on Windows with GitLab. So what's in the brown bag? First, we'll go over the current state of Windows in GitLab CI/CD, and we'll talk about how we could have a Google Compute image that would allow for quick development machine to be spun up. Then I'll run through a screenshot demo basically of how you could use this image on Google Compute. And then we'll talk through some of the Windows developer tips that I gained as I dove into Windows coming from Linux and Mac. The first option that you have if you have a CI/CD job that needs to run on Windows is to use our shared Windows runners on GitLab.com that are in beta. This is a quote here from the release post. So it was announced GitLab 12.7. To use them, it's quite easy actually. All that you really need to do are to add these 3 tags to your job in your CI/CD configuration, and it will use the Windows runner. Here in the next slide, we'll talk more about the environment and what's included, but one thing to note is that the workflow is likely a bit different since it doesn't have the Docker executor. So your script, your before and after script are all ran inside of Windows shell, basically. I think PowerShell is probably available as well inside of those scripts. That'd be good to double check though.
It defaults to PowerShell on Windows Shell Runner.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Darwin.
Yes, CMD has been depreciated.
So another quick question. I see that in the tags at Windows 1809, which is a fairly old version of Windows. I imagine, is this an environment variable where you can actually select the Windows?
You know, not that I'm aware of right now. I mean, it'd be great to reach out to the runner team, and they probably have a better answer there. But I talked to them about where should I even get started, because I wanted an environment that was similar to what I would get with the shared Windows runners. So that, you know, I could be able to use those in my research. But as far as I know, and we'll get to it when I show you how I went about building the Google Compute instance, they're using Packer to build it. And I believe they're only building based on top of one version of Windows at this point. But I think that is an interesting question, and that may be why they have that tag, and maybe in the future, they'll have a different tag if you want a different version.
Okay. Yeah, and it's super easy to understand. The first two are the year, the second two are the month. So that's from September of 2018. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, I see an announcement version 1809 for December of 2019.
that can't
Maybe
be
they,
right. That I promise you that can't be right.
okay. Wow.
Okay. Oh, and just to double check that I did this right, you all see just the slides, right? Not my other screen? Okay,
That's
cool.
correct. Yep.
All right. Any other questions? Those have all been great. All right.
So presumably no Windows 3.1.
No Windows 3.1, is that what I heard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just checking.
Just DOS,
My Mac has been locking up lately, like serious, like the whole GUI won't work. And I'm like, I know the Windows 95 kernel's in there somewhere.
Yep. Yeah, I'm sure it's all in there. So here's a truncated list of some of the stuff that's included currently on the shared Windows runners. You can see there's a package manager, Chocolatey, some build tools from Visual Studio, NuGet, or however you say that, curl, wget. And then you can see there's also some common languages we use here at GitLab: Ruby, Go, Node.js. And it says Docker Compose, but Docker also is installed. So you can use Docker, you just can't use it in the way that you would, say specify an image in your runner. But in your script, you could certainly use Docker if you so chose. And then the other option for working with Windows and GitLab CI/CD together is for you to own and run a Windows server, whether that's in the cloud or on Metal somewhere, and then to register, install the GitLab Runner and register it with your project, your group, or your GitLab instance if you have admin access to the instance. This was something that I actually was able to do with the thing that I was researching. It ran, or it required .NET 3.5, which the shared runners don't have. And so I actually used this development engine that I was using and then connected it to the repo that I was working through that had known vulnerabilities to see that our static analysis tool was working correctly. So we'll talk more about that later when we have a dev machine that we can use. So now let's talk about how you would create a Windows image and how I went about it. And I think the Windows or the runner team is doing something similar. They're using Packer, which is an easy to use tool that you can configure how to build an image, and it's cloud agnostic. So you could do it in Google Compute or AWS or Azure, and I think a few others potentially, maybe even VirtualBox. So it's a really nice infrastructure as code tool that allows you to build reproducible images and define them in code. And so I have a link here that sends that where you could go and take a look at the code that would be required to build this. But since they've built it this way, it also means that you can clone this repo and then set up a few environment variables and build it yourself. Here are a few steps that you would need to do to be able to use this repo to build your own image in Google Compute. You'd have to install Packer, and it's known to work with version 1.5.1, which is what I ended up pinning to. I think there might be a newer version or two, but I can't remember if it was the GitLab Packer repo or if it's that this Windows Update Provisioner Packer plugin that you have to install. But one of the two said that they work with 1.5.1, so I thought, no need to go with the latest, I'll just go with what they're using. And then the other thing that this repo relies on is that you have a Packer Windows Update Provisioner plugin installed, which allows the Packer configuration to update Windows at the end of its run installing everything so that your image is up to date. And it actually was a little bit complicated to figure out at first, because if you go to their repo there on GitHub, they build an executable from their Go source code for Linux and for Windows, but they don't build it for Mac. So unfortunately, in order for that to work, you have to clone it, you have to build it with Go, and then you then need to make sure that the executable is part of your shell path for wherever you'll be running Packer. You'll need to then, inside of the Packer JSON, you'll see at the very top there are a few environment variables that are required. I used durenv to just set them, but you could also just export them or put them before your Packer build command. But there will be some required environment variables, and then to run Packer build Packer JSON, and then it does the magic and puts it up there. One thing to note, if you're in the group secure Google Cloud group, you can go ahead and use the GCP image for I already built it. So we've got that done, but we've also been segmenting some of our different teams. And so I wanted to make sure to cover this in case another team wanted to work with a feature that they needed Windows to do development. One other point here though to make is that I can't remember how I got GCP to allow me to build it, because it doesn't ask me for a password. I don't remember how Packer authenticates with Google Compute. It could have been because I already had installed the GCloud CLI tool and had configured there. But you know, if anyone's working through this in the future and would like someone to pair with them, I'd love to work through it. So that's something that I didn't document when I was doing this, and I don't remember how that works.
So Daniel, this runs from your Mac, not on a Linux instance in the cloud. Then it does. It's not in Google. It's not GitLab CI. This part.
This part is not. This is a part. This is building a Google Compute image that you can use to start up a VM.
Sure, I was thinking you'd do it with a runner, but you should know too. There's a PS Windows Update PowerShell plugin that you can just do install package and get that, and so you could skip that whole part. And then it's got very straightforward command lines to do the patching. So you could then just pull that PowerShell plugin down and then run it yourself and skip the built-in Packer one if it's giving you a lot of troubles to get it set up right.
Thanks for the call out on the Mac piece too, because I know a lot of us use Linux, and if you're using Linux, then you likely just need to download the latest binary from GitHub there and put it in your path. So that would solve that for Linux. And then, Darwin, if you wouldn't mind maybe opening an issue or a comment on that repo, that'd be great. Otherwise, I can look into that as well. But this is a repo that the runner team is managing. So I'm just getting to stand on their shoulders and use the work they've already done. Any other questions? Okay. Or comments. So here we'll go ahead and walk through how you would use this image in the Google Cloud. As you can see, I went to cloud.google.com. You want to click that link console. This took a little bit to find, but you go to the hamburger menu, compute engine, and then images. And then you click the name of it. And then in there, you'll have this option to create the instance. Once you're there, then it takes you to a page where you can configure your VM. But one thing that you'll want to make sure to do, because the default is like instance 1 or instance 2, it's very generic, is this is the only opportunity you have to set the name for your VM. And since these have been things that I've been developing with, and I want other folks coming into our group to know, oh, he created this, I've been prepending it with my email/GitLab handle so folks know that I created it. So this is your only chance to do that. And then I set the region and the zone to be as close to me geographically as possible. And there may be other options that you may want to do. But once you've got all of those things figured out, then you just scroll to the bottom and hit the create button. And then it'll redirect you to the VM instances page. Depending upon the state of things, there may be a lot of instances, and it may be really easy to find it. you can click into the filter VM and find it. Once you find it, you'll want to go ahead and click on your name. And then you'll see this fun little button that lets you set the Windows password. You'll want to save that to a safe location. Worst case though, if you do lose it, you can always hit the button again. I've done that. Just hit it again and then it'll generate a new one. And once you have that password, then you can go ahead and download the RDP file. One thing to note with this is that it is tied specifically to the current IP of the VM instance. So if you were to stop and start this instance again, it gets a new IP and you would need to re-download that file. Once you've downloaded that file, you can go ahead and open it. I've been just using the tool that Microsoft created for a remote desktop. They build it for Linux, Mac, and Windows. I saw it, I can't remember which channel, but there were quite a few people who use quite a few different other tools. I know that can also do this remote desktop piece. So if you find that that app isn't quite as powerful as you need, I'm sure there are many other folks that know. In Slack you can ask. But I've found it's been all that I've needed so far. And then once you go in and once you accept the certificate, it'll ask for your password, you paste that in and you'll be into a Windows machine. One thing I've been doing as well is I've been stopping the instances when I'm done, which does save on money. I think if Google charges in the same way that AWS does, then there probably is like some negligible fee for like the disk space that you're using, but it does save some money by stopping it. So I've been stopping and starting them as a dev machine just to try to cut down on cost. And it's not too much of a hassle to just re-download the RDP file. And then here's a few steps that you can follow to use this new instance as a runner. If you wanted to say, for example, wanted to use a version that's newer than 1809, update that Packer configuration, build an image, and then see what it looked like. Or you wanted to install some other language or some other version of a language, like what I had to do with the .NET framework. You can register it, and then on GetLab.com, if you have the rights to the repo or admin rights to the group, you can also add, you can register it at either of those levels. I registered it with the webgo.net repo, test repo that we have, and was able to use it successfully. And it basically follows this simple plan where GetLab Runner is already installed in this image, so you don't need to start at that step. You just need to register, and then you'll want to run this install command and then start it, and then you can use it within your repo. So that is how to use the Windows image. Any questions so far? All right.
I just have one quick question.
Oh, yeah.
Is this, so the idea here is if you need to prepare an image that's that has more stuff on it than the other one, or it might be a different Windows OS? Yeah,
you certainly could do that. The point that I'm making with this slide in particular is the fact that in general, like when you're new to a system, it's nice to have something to iterate a little quicker than trying to change a repo and just using a runner or to debug or go deeper into code. And so like as just a developer machine was the main purpose of this. But
okay.
If you find that you need something that deviates from what they're supplying as a shared runner, you also can register it with a project and try it out and see that, like, so in the case of SAST, right? Like I have a repository with known vulnerabilities that uses .NET 3.5. The shared Windows runners don't support that. And so I
Right.
had to install that. Well, I wanted to see, does this actually work with the whole CI/CD workflow? And so I was able to
Yeah.
register
I'm
it
wondering,
then in that case.
yeah, what I'm wondering is if what you're doing is additive to what the image they've already built, if they could just publish that image into whatever test account you're in. I know you can do this in AWS. I don't know if you can do this in GCP. You could actually boot it, manually add what you need, shut it down, make another image, and then you might not have to do the whole Packer thing and build from scratch. I don't know. That's how I would do it if it was Amazon. I don't know GCP well enough to know if they can share images across accounts or. And do you, Daniel, did you have a test account? They don't let you go into the prod GCP account, right?
No, Secure has their own, I think they call them groups.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there was also like an internal development group that we were a part of, but now we're in the Secure group,
Yeah.
Google group. So really this is, I have started that discussion with the Runner team regarding like, does it make sense to like have .NET 3.5, or am I just using this really old repository that has known vulnerabilities and I need to find something more current, right? The point here is just more so like if you find this development machine, you want to take it the next step to where you actually are using it in CI/CD. There's a good chance that other folks might not need to do that. But with my development task, I found, wow, I really need to use this just to see, does it even work, right? Before I would even want to propose them to modify, the shared runners. I want to see, does this work? Am I in the right path, etc. So you can do this and then remove it from the project at a later date too.
What I was thinking is if they could just share the image they've already built and are using in production into your account or your group within Google, then you could potentially just go from there, like fire that up, put .NET.
Oh yeah.
Shut it down and then, just
that is something that I looked for. I don't think I had access to it. So that's why I then went with the Packer. I was like, okay, well, at least I can have something that's built in the same way.
Yeah.
Since it's, reproducible builds is the idea behind that. So that was the reason why I went with that direction. But if enough, groups do this, then yeah, the image will already be there. Most folks won't need to interface with Packer. They just start up an instance based on that image, and then they could modify it to their heart's content as a development cycle, see what they would actually want to, suggest in terms of changes upstream, and then could iterate in that way. Does that make sense? Cool. Any other questions about using the image in Google? No? Okay. So here are a few tips from a Windows noob coming from Nix. First off, here's kind of a little bit about Chocolatey, which is a package manager, akin to Homebrew if you're on Mac, or apt-get if you're on Ubuntu, or fill in a blank since almost every Linux distro has a different one. And here's a couple examples. So I found I didn't want to use Visual Studio to make a couple small edits to a file that I was iterating on. So I installed Vim, and you can just do that with Choco install Vim. I also found that I needed Visual Studio at a certain point because so much of the .NET framework workflow, a lot of their docs are, yeah, just in your menu in Visual Studio, do X, do Y, do it with the GUI. And there wasn't much, I'm sure there are ways to do a lot of those things on the command line, but that wasn't what I was finding. And so I found that actually having Visual Studio and firing it up and using it was actually pretty useful. And it does work inside this VM with the remote desktop client. The thing that's a little bit more confusing though is you only have a shell. And I can show that here at the end in a moment too. But you only have a shell, so you got to figure out how to open that program without a Windows menu. And so I successfully Googled it and found that that's the command if you ran that. Here is how I figured out how to add .NET 3 support. I suspect that no one will probably need this slide, but I did. And it took quite a while to track that one down because so much of it, they wanted you to use like the Windows menu and like open, the the settings app or this or that. And I was like, it wouldn't let me. So I finally found this command will do it. And then here's some other ones, some other tips for those of us coming from Bash to Windows Command. So instead of ls, it'd be dir, or instead of rm, it's delete. One that gets you though is if you have an on-empty directory, it's rm dir, and then that /s is like a way that you can add arguments, it seems. You can also notice that your path separator goes the other way. Instead of catting a file, you would type the file, and move is spelt out. Surprising to me at first, redirection works the same way. So if you wanted to like have some output of a command and dump it into a file, you can do that. You can call a local executable, just like you would expect on Unix. And actually, this was something that I think that it will also look in the current directory before your global path as well. So you might be able to omit the // if you're in the correct directory. You know if that's true, Darwin?
Well, I was just going to say, if you use PowerShell instead of CMD, all of this goes away. There's aliases for all of those. I use cat all the time in PowerShell. And then in PowerShell core, you'll be in Windows PowerShell at that point. In PowerShell core, they did remove some of these aliases because when they started building core, you want to use the real Linux command. But if you're in Windows PowerShell, ls, rm, the / works in PowerShell instead of the \, cat, move. Also, you do require the / in front of something that's in the current folder for the same reason it's required in Bash. So when they built PowerShell, they actually took Bash as one of the primary examples, and then also DEC and AS400, which had the very memorable command names and the discoverable help built in. So if you just go to PowerShell, you'll find a lot of your Linux-isms are already there for you.
Sounds like it's time for me to grow up as a Windows dev.
No bad vibes meant at all, man.
Oh, no. I'm just saying, this is where I started. I didn't know. And some of the way that they had their arguments felt like a lot. So I didn't realize I would have saved myself a lot of grief just using
PowerShell.
So yeah, sounds like that's the way to go.
Yeah.
So you can start up PowerShell from the command line, I think, by just type power and tab complete. Oh, tab completion also works with a lot of these commands as well.
Yeah, and actually, if you're on a core machine, which it sounds like you are, there's no GUI, no Windows GUI, do start PowerShell instead, and you'll get the actual PowerShell console as well. Doing PowerShell inside the CMD console is extremely painful. So you do start space PowerShell, you'll get the proper PowerShell one, and it's much more usable and resizable and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I have actually right here. Can you, what do you see the slides, or do you see remote desktop now?
Yeah, remote desktop.
Visual Studio.
Yeah, so you can see I opened
That's
Visual
amazing
Studio.
because, yeah, most of .NET GUI is not available in core, so they must have made sure that they stay with the primitive APIs. Yeah, if you do start space PowerShell, there's a start command in CMD.
Like that?
But yeah, and now the console that pops up is much more usable. It's a big improvement. Also, Microsoft's working on a super interesting terminal that you could then do install module. Chocolate is not the only package manager. Yeah.
This is much
better. Yeah, you can it stops that constant like frustration of trying to switch depending on what OS you're on.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I could git ignore. Oh, it did switch this / for me though, but okay. Well, there you go. So that's a really good find, that just open up PowerShell. So
and that's because you did tab completion.
You type start in PowerShell and you're good to go.
Yeah. Go to town.
Nice. Any other questions or comments? Cool. Well, one other thing I'll show you here was with the Packer file here. I created this mbarc, and these are the all that you really need to supply, and then you're off to the races. Because of this right here, you can see the variables at the very top. So, oh, yep, cool. Thank you. Darwin just added suggesting to start PowerShell to the document. So,
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So with this setup, I can see why this would work really good for using GitLab.com with a custom GitLab Runner environment on Windows. Have you had any problems running a Windows VM locally with a local GitLab instance running? Is it just too intensive, or?
You know what? That's a really good question. I have not tried to do that yet, but that being said, I wonder, I think Packer can output other images like VirtualBox. So
I've only used it with VirtualBox and VMware. So it's good from the other side, hearing that it works well with GCP. I've only used it the other way.
It'd be really interesting to see if we could extend that to build, other images that could be useful locally. And I think as long as the VM you're running locally can access your local GitLab instance, like, via the network, then I don't see why you wouldn't be able to register and use that as your runner.
Okay,
so
awesome.
It's really about, like, can the runner connect to the other, as far as I understand it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Darwin.
No, go, no.
Oh, I was just going to say, in the past, I've never used GitLab.com in a work environment. We've always had self-hosted instances. And so having just random one-off runners, where it's, as long as you can make it talk to the GitLab instance, that's something that it works really well. And simple concept, right? If they can talk, it works. So.
If we have any MSDN licenses, you're allowed to use the trial version of Windows to develop without activating it. And I already have, I don't for the most recent, but for 2012 and 2016, I have images I prepared for VirtualBox that are sys-prepped and they're the trial. So every time you boot them from scratch, they start over the 120 days. And this is totally a valid way to use it if you're licensed. And then you can then do snapshots. And then at the end of the 128 days, there's a couple ways to keep rearming it. You get up to 180 days out of it. And then you can reset to the original snapshot, boot it again. And so that's one thing to think about. Or if you even have a Windows license and you don't want to keep activating it, or be concerned about preserving the VM because it's got an activated license on it, that might be another way that you're covered as far as licensing goes to run it locally. But when you use it in the cloud, of course, you're using a cloud license. So it's the other thing too, Daniel, is rather than doing Packer again, I see they have Ruby or Chef recipes out there for the base build. You could actually just get those, just figure out the scripting to pull that repo down and run that. And then people could do it on whatever they have, wherever they have Windows, whether it's AWS or wherever. They could get that base build running if they need to see what the base build of the runner's like, rather than doing Packer everywhere. Because
that's a good note, or a good thing to note, is actually the majority of Packer's work. It basically does a few things. It talks to GCP to create the image. It then uses the Chef runner to run the Chef recipes. And then it just finishes up with making sure that Windows is up to date with that Windows Update plugin. But I wanted to try to stay as close to as possible to how they were creating their images for the runners. But there's certainly a lot of possibilities for other ways and maybe easier workflows here.
And if any of you run into really weird long boot times, anytime you add .NET assemblies, they need to be bytecode compiled just like Java. And if you add like a service pack or two and then just shut it down, the next time you boot it, there's going to be a queue inside of Windows and it's going to try to do it in the background. But then if you boot it in some rickety little instance that's having a hard time even booting, a minimal Linux distro, that Windows process is going to bury the box. So you either need to do an ngen, there's an ngen command that you can natively generate the images before shutdown, or don't boot it on tiny little instances that will get buried. But I've had to handle for image generation on Amazon a lot of complaints about boot up times. And so if
Oh,
you
nice.
run into any problems along that line, give me a shout. I can help out.
Cool. Thanks for the tip. All right. Any other thoughts,
I
comments?
added a link into the which Google Doc was that? The agenda one. This is what I use Box Cutter for creating my local Windows VMs. It uses Packer, or it's a collection of Packer configurations and setups to create Windows or Ubuntu VMs of almost any version. And they're the trial ones, just like Darwin was saying. And it takes care of pulling down the ISO and everything for you.
Oh, wow.
So even if I just need the ISO and I don't want all of Packer, I usually look it up there because they've got the URLs for all of them.
Wow, this is a good resource. Thank you. All right. Unless anyone else has any other comments or questions, I'll go ahead and stop the share.
I just have one question. Is this in preparation for getting SAST completely working for Windows? Is that what
Yep.
everybody's trying to? Okay, cool.
That was my main driver for, okay, I don't have Windows. It's been a long time since I've used Windows. I've got a shared runner, but I don't want to iterate with just, pushing changes and seeing CI change. How do I have some form of a development machine? And so that was my approach.
Nice.
All right, I'll go ahead and stop the recording.